Okay, finally we're going to cover the ear, which is on pages 52 and 53 of your lab packet. On page 292, this is the picture that we see in your book, which represents the picture that you see in your lab packet as well. You can see how we've broken up the ear into the external ear, the middle of the ear, and the middle of the ear and the inner ear, if you will. So let's start with the external part of the ear. We have two parts we have to recognize. The first part is the auricle, as you can see here. This is the folded part of the ear that you can see on yourself and on your neighbor. And the reason it's folded is so that you can vibrate or send vibrations into your neck structure, which is called your external auditory meatus or canal, which would be your ear canal. So those two parts are just part of your external part of your ear, which is pretty straightforward. If you look at the middle of your ear, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here, the first thing that we run into after we come in is this tightly stretched membrane called the tympanic membrane. You guys might know it as your eardrum. It is now the tympanic membrane, a very tightly stretched membrane. And attached to that, there are three of the smallest bones in your body. The first one is called your malleus. In the middle one is called your incus. And the last one back here is your stapes. Those three bones are the smallest bones in your body, and we call them the auditory ossicles. Now what happens is that when vibrations come into the ear, they vibrate the tympanic membrane, which vibrates the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. So essentially what we're trying to do is continue the vibration inward, which we'll get to in just a moment. There is also the auditory, the eustachian tube that comes out of the middle of the ear right here. And this goes to your pharynx, which we talked about, which was your throat. And this just helps drain any fluid that might be in the middle of your ear. So this space in the middle of the ear here, where we see these very small auditory ossicles, is called the tympanic cavity. And this is where kids' ear infections like to brew the most, is in the middle of the ear there. So if we work our way to the inner part of the ear, this material here, notice how the inner portions of the ear are situated within the skeletal system, inside the bone. And just to give you an idea of how big this really is right here, all this material, it's about the size of a pea, like the type of pea that you would have at dinner. So let's look at a couple of the structures that we see inside the inner ear. First, let's just talk, I'm going to skip down to the cochlea here because we're talking about hearing right now. The cochlea is this seashell-shaped structure right here, and this is solely responsible for hearing. So as these vibrations come in through the tympanic membrane, through the auditory ossicles, a vibration goes in through the cochlea and stimulates the nerve right here, which gets sent to your brain so you can analyze what you're actually hearing. The next structure is the semicircular canals. These canals that look like they're in different arrangements here, they help with dynamic equilibrium, which is equilibrium in motion. So for example, when you're doing a cartwheel, how to know when to land properly and not lose your balance. The semicircular canals are helpful in those type of equilibrium. In the middle, we have the vestibulae, and this would be this area right here. And the vestibulae is responsible for static equilibrium. And this is in relation to your head, in relation to gravity. Another example of static equilibrium would be acceleration versus deceleration, and being able to pick up on the fact that you're accelerating or decelerating. Basically, inside this little area of the ear here, we have little crystals that can detect where our head is in relation to gravity, and it gives us a sense of where we're at. And then all of these senses that are coming from the inner ear are connecting to one larger nerve, one of our cranial nerves, called the vestibular cochlear nerve. From there, this information, the nerve impulses, are being sent to the brain to be analyzed. What type of equilibrium are you experiencing? What type of movement are you experiencing? What type of vibrations, and processing that information and interpreting that information. In our brain, that's where all of that is happening, is the interpretation of that. Now, in regards to the model, it's pretty straightforward as well. Let me zoom out here for you. Here you can see the auricle, you can see the external auditory canal, and then you have your tympanic membrane right here, which is tightly stretched. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. There are 3 bones that are attached to it, which would be the malleus. In the middle is the incus, and then at the end is the stapes right here. And again, that's all attached to this tympanic membrane. There in the tympanic cavity that we see right here, zoom out just a little bit. There's a tympanic cavity, so then here's the eustachian tube that leads down into the throat. If you look at the inner part of the ear, again, you can see how it's all situated within bone. And I'm going to actually take this out, because this can come out. And you can see the cochlea here. You can see the semicircular canals. And then just in the middle here would be the vestibulae. And then you can see coming off of the back is the vestibular cochlear nerve. Okay, so all of these models, along with the pictures that you see in your book, could be fair game for the exam. Your exam is going to be the week coming up here that you after this, so it will be covering not only the brain and the neuron, but also be covering the spinal cord and special senses. So it'll be covering pages 46 through 53. That will be what your next exam will be on. I hope you find this helpful.